What would you do if the man who destroyed your life smiled at you from a billboard 10 years later? Patrick had two choices: expose him or do something far more dangerous: forgive him. The day Patrick Holly's lost everything wasn't stormy or dramatic. It was irritatingly normal. Sunny, 72 degrees. The kind of day that should have ended with a cold beer and a quiet smile. Instead, it ended with a bang that echoed through the next 10 years of his life. He was 38, vice president of product development at a rising construction firm in St. Louis, a man with a decent house, a faithful wife named Dana, and a 10-year-old son who still thought his dad could out-wrestle The Rock. By all external accounts, Patrick was winning. Not the lottery winner kind of winning, but the respectable adult sort. Promotions, barbecues with neighbors, weekends at the lake. Until Russell Greer was the guy who brought banana bread into meetings, the one who volunteered to help even when no one asked. Fresh-faced, charming, just happy to be here kind of energy. He joined the company as a junior analyst and within a year was shadowing Patrick like a golden retriever in a tie. Patrick didn't mind at first. Mentorship gave him a sense of importance and Russell made him feel smart until he didn't. The thing about betrayal is it never shows up in fangs and red flags. It smiles. It nods. It remembers your kid's birthday and asks about your wife's ankle after surgery. Then one day it pulls the rug out so cleanly you don't hit the floor until you're already bleeding. One Thursday morning, Patrick arrived at work to find two HR reps in his office. They weren't smiling. There were folders, thick ones, accusations, misuse of funds, tampered contracts, false sign-offs. Patrick's signature, his real one, they said, on a dozen fraudulent documents. Impossible, he kept saying, someone's framing me. But it didn't matter, the board had already made its decision. He was escorted out, no lawsuit, no second chances, just silence. And just like that, the career he'd spent 18 years building collapsed like wet drywall. Dana tried to believe him, at first, but the news spread as it always does and every whisper in the grocery aisle chipped away at her trust. When she found a second bank account in his name, a dummy account Russell had created using Patrick's ID, the doubt turned to ice. She moved out 6 weeks later, taking their son with her. Patrick didn't fight it, couldn't. He barely left his one-bedroom rental those first 2 years. Unemployable, disgraced, suicidal if he was honest. He drank himself into shadows and nightmares, and the only person who still answered his calls was his sister, Mara, who lived 2 states away and never judged him for crying. Then 5 years in, something changed. Maybe it was rock bottom. Maybe it was the day he saw his reflection in a gas station mirror and didn't recognize the man staring back. But he stopped drinking, got a job as a janitor at a high school, worked nights, said almost nothing to anyone. For a long time, just surviving was enough. But grace, when it arrives, comes in whispers. One night after his shift, he sat in the bleachers of the gym, wiping his face with a rag. A boy wandered in, bounced a basketball twice, then sat near him. "You used to be someone, huh?" the kid said. Patrick smiled, "Still am." That boy Jamal came back night after night. He had a deadbeat father and a mother who worked double shifts. Patrick showed him how to box out, how to pivot. They didn't talk about the past, just ball and sweat and breath. And slowly, without noticing, Patrick became someone again. Not the someone he used to be, but someone. Then, 10 years after the day that ruined his life, Patrick saw a face on a billboard he never expected to see again. Russell Greer running for city council, smiling, waving, integrity, leadership, vision. Something cold settled in Patrick's chest. Because now he had a choice. He could destroy Russell the way Russell destroyed him. Or he could do something far harder. He could forgive him. Russell's face haunted Patrick more than he cared to admit. It wasn't just the billboard, though that was bad enough, grinning, buttoned up, promising justice and progress. It was seeing that same face in the headlines, on news interviews, on flyers littered across town. As if none of it had ever happened. As if Patrick's life had simply been a hiccup in Russell's climb. The rage returned in quiet, uninvited waves. Patrick would be mopping the high school's marble floors, humming along to the distant thump of a basketball, when suddenly he'd remember the way Russell used to borrow his pen during meetings. Or how he'd laughed too hard at Patrick's jokes. Or how he signed those documents, perfect forgeries, with a hand he once used to clap Patrick's back. Patrick couldn't tell anyone. Who would listen now? Dana wouldn't return his messages. His son Caleb was a junior in college and only texted on holidays. The only person he could really talk to was Mara. "You should expose him," she said one evening over the phone. Her voice always had that gravelly warmth like black coffee and wool blankets. "Go public, get a lawyer, you've got nothing to lose." "I've got 10 years of silence," Patrick said. "That's all anyone will remember. If I scream now, it just looks like bitterness." Mara was quiet a long time. "So you're gonna do what? Sit and take it, let him walk into office like he's Saint Russell?" Patrick didn't answer. But the idea gnawed at him. That week he requested a few days off and drove down to his old neighborhood. It had changed. The liquor store had become a smoothie bar. The barber's pole still spun, but the faces inside were younger, unfamiliar. He stood outside his old house, watching a woman water tulips in what used to be Dana's front garden. Everything was different, except the ache in his gut. He drove to City Hall the next morning. Russell was scheduled to speak at a community meet and greet, shake hands, answer questions. Patrick didn't know what he was doing there. He wore an old polo and sat in the back row, his heart hammering like he was the one on stage. And then Russell walked in. Same hair, though a little thinner, same effortless smile. He moved like a man who'd never had to look over his shoulder. Patrick watched stone-faced as Russell talked about second chances, economic growth, believing in people. The crowd loved him. But Patrick saw the lie, not in the words but in the eyes. There was a flicker when their gazes met, a momentary wince. Russell saw him. He stumbled over a sentence, looked away. After the event, Patrick followed the crowd out but looped back, found Russell near the stage, pretending to check his phone. "Russell," he said. The man froze. "Patrick," he replied, slowly turning. His voice was lower now, maybe from years of public speaking, but it still had that same calculated warmth. "Didn't expect, wow, you look good." Patrick said nothing. He watched Russell squirm, sweat beading under his collar. I always wondered how you were doing." "You didn't wonder a damn thing." Russell opened his mouth, but Patrick held up a hand. 10 years, Patrick said. 10 years I lost everything, my wife, my son, my name, you took all that from me. Russell swallowed. "Look, I can't undo the past, but this isn't the place." "There never is," Patrick said. Then he leaned in just enough to whisper, "I'm not here to hurt you, Russell, but you're gonna make it right." Russell blinked. "What does that mean?" Patrick stepped back. "You'll find out." He left without another word. Not because he didn't want revenge, but because he was finally realizing something darker, stranger, and more powerful. Forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was a weapon. The next morning, Russell's campaign manager received a brown envelope with no return address. Inside, a copy of a forged contract from 2015, a list of timestamps from internal servers, and a single sticky note that read, "Ask him who signed this." No name, no threat, just enough to crack the shell. Patrick didn't want to destroy Russell's career with a splash. No viral video, no teary tell-all. He wanted something slower, sharper, like letting the man drown in the truth 1 inch at a time. By Thursday, whispers began circling in City Hall. Something about an old scandal, documents, a ghost from the past, nothing concrete but enough to rattle nerves, enough to make Russell sweat through his suit during a live interview. Patrick watched it all unfold from his small apartment, legs crossed, a bowl of canned chili in his lap. He wasn't proud, not exactly, but justice, even delayed, had a taste, and for once it wasn't bitter. Then came the unexpected twist. A knock at his door. It was past 9 p.m. He wasn't expecting anyone. When he opened it, his son stood there, taller, leaner, same dark eyes. He looked like a man Patrick had only seen in pictures himself a lifetime ago. "Caleb," Patrick breathed. "Hey, Dad." There was a pause. "I was in town," Caleb said. "Mom told me you moved here." Patrick stepped aside, wordlessly. The air was too thick for small talk. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table Patrick used to use as a ladder stand when Caleb was 4. "I saw the news," Caleb said, "about that councilman Russell Greer." Patrick's throat tightened. "Yeah. Mom told me you tried to tell her that he framed you." "She didn't believe me." "She does now." Patrick blinked. "What?" She started connecting dots. There were things, letters she found recently, timelines that didn't add up. She said if she could go back, she'd listen. Patrick stared at his son. The years crashed down on him all at once. "You're in college," he said softly. "Graduated in May. What do you study?" "Political science," Caleb said, then smiled faintly. Ironic, huh? Patrick let out something between a laugh and a sob. The dam had cracked. Not fully, but enough to feel the cold water beneath. They talked for hours, about nothing and everything, about Caleb's band, his girlfriend, his thesis on restorative justice. At one point, Caleb said, "You still ball." Patrick chuckled. "These knees retired in 19. Before he left, Caleb looked his father in the eye. "Are you gonna go after him, legally?" Patrick hesitated. "I could," he said, "but I don't want the world to see me as the guy who came back swinging." "What do you want to be seen as?" Patrick exhaled. A man who learned how to forgive. Caleb nodded. That's harder. Yeah, Patrick said, it is. After he left, Patrick stood alone in the doorway. The night was quiet. The street lamp outside buzzed faintly. He didn't sleep that night. Not because of rage or regret, but because something inside him had begun to thaw. Forgiveness wasn't a surrender. It was a choice. And maybe, just maybe, it could also be a start. 3 days after Caleb's visit, Patrick received a letter. Not an email, not a text. A real letter, thick, cream-colored envelope, hand-addressed in tight, conservative script. The kind of thing people sent when they wanted to seem serious or scared. Inside was an invitation. Mr. Hollies, please join me for dinner. I owe you a conversation. Russell Greer. 6 p.m. Friday, Elliot and Pine private room. No apology, no justification, just an offer. Patrick stared at it a long time. He set it down, picked it back up, turned it over like it might reveal a hidden clause. He told himself it didn't matter, that no food would ever sit right with that man across the table, that if forgiveness was real, it didn't require closure. But part of him wanted to look Russell in the eye and see if there was still a soul behind the performance. He said yes. Friday came wet and gray. Elliot and Pine was the kind of upscale place where the waiters wore vests and the napkins were folded like origami. The hostess led him to a glassed-in room in the back. Dim light, one table, 2 chairs, a bottle of red wine already breathing. Russell was late. When he arrived, he looked older. Not tired, calculatedly weary, like a man trying to appear more human. Patrick, he said, voice low, thanks for coming. They didn't shake hands, they didn't smile. Russell sat, the silence stretched. I'll get to it, he said, I did it. What happened to you, it was me. Patrick said nothing. I was scared, Russell continued. You were the rising star, everyone liked you. I thought if I could just push you out of the way, maybe there'd be space for me. Patrick raised an eyebrow, you framed me for felony fraud. Russell winced, I didn't think it would stick. Patrick laughed once, short and bitter. It stuck, Russell, it buried me. I know, he said, eyes falling. I watched you fall apart, I read every headline, I told myself I'd fix it someday, but the deeper I got into politics, the more he stopped, chewing the next word. I became someone else. Patrick stared at him. You didn't become someone else, he said. You revealed who you already were. The waiter entered, but neither man touched the menus. Russell waved him off. The room buzzed with tension, heavy and humid. I'm not here to beg, Russell said, or make excuses. I'm here to ask, how are you still standing after all that? Patrick leaned back. Because I stopped needing the world to see me as a victim or a hero. I cleaned floors, coached kids, found some kind of peace. Russell looked like he might cry. Patrick hoped he wouldn't. It would ruin the honesty. I want to make it right, Russell said finally. I'll step down from the race. Patrick blinked. Why? Because if I win now, everything I've built will be tainted. And because I need to know what it feels like to lose something real. Patrick stood. He wasn't hungry, wasn't angry either, just empty in a new kind of way. I'm not the judge, Russell, he said. You're not here for my forgiveness, you're here for permission to forgive yourself. Russell looked down. Do I have it? Patrick paused. Then that's not mine to give. He walked out without looking back. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds broke just enough for a sliver of light to catch on the wet pavement. Patrick stood there for a moment, breathing in the cold. He didn't feel triumphant, but he did feel cleansed. And that was enough. On Monday morning, Patrick walked into the high school an hour earlier than usual. The hallways were still quiet. Lockers lined up like tired soldiers, linoleum floors polished to a dull shine. He liked the stillness, the peace before the chaos of adolescence came storming through. He didn't think about Russell. Not exactly. But something about the dinner had hollowed out a room inside him that hadn't existed before. Not grief, not rage, something quieter, like stepping into a house you once owned and realizing someone else's furniture is there now. The janitor's closet smelled of bleach and dust. He took his time preparing the mop bucket, gloves, keys. Routine was sacred now. It gave shape to the silence. Halfway through his first sweep, he heard it. Basketballs, sneakers squeaking. Jamal was back. Patrick wandered into the gym. Jamal was shooting from the elbow, headphones in, sweat already beading on his forehead. He'd grown taller, stronger. 17 now, probably a foot taller than when Patrick first met him. You don't miss a morning, Patrick said. Jamal pulled his earbuds out, grinned, and you don't miss a mop. Patrick nodded, fair enough. They shot around for a while. No scoreboard, no coaching, just rhythm, air and rubber and the occasional curse when the shot clanked. Then Jamal stopped, looked at him. Hey, he said, bouncing the ball once, you ever think about coaching? Patrick blinked. I coach you. I mean, like for real, there's a part-time assistant gig open. Coach Mendoza's looking. Patrick opened his mouth, closed it. He hadn't let himself imagine doing anything beyond pushing brooms. That job had been his penance, his shelter. But the thought stayed with him. That night he looked at himself in the mirror. The man staring back wasn't the ghost from 10 years ago. He still had gray in his beard, scars under the skin, but there was something steady in his eyes, something finished. He shaved, not all the way, just enough to see what his face looked like when he cared. Then he opened his laptop, drafted an email to Coach Mendoza, attached the rec letter from the principal he'd never used, hit send. The next day, Coach called. You've been here a while, Mendoza said. Kids respect you, you ever yell. Only at refs, Patrick said. Mendoza laughed. Come in tomorrow, let's see how you move on the court. By the end of the week, he was helping run drills. It felt right, not like his old life, not a redemption arc, just a different purpose, one he didn't have to fake. Then came a message from Dana. Not a call, a short text. Caleb told me about what you did, about the dinner. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. He stared at the screen for a long time. 10 years ago, those words would have been gold. Now they were something better, closure. He didn't text back. Not yet. Instead, he opened a new tab and began writing something for himself. Not for the courts, not for revenge. A letter to Caleb, a real one, pen and paper. About what it meant to fall, and to forgive. About choosing peace even when you had every reason not to. About the moment when you look in the mirror and see someone you finally respect. He folded it carefully, sealed it. Outside, the world kept moving, slowly without fanfare. But Patrick Holly's had changed. And that was no small thing. It was a Saturday afternoon when Patrick found himself standing in front of Dana's old house again. Same picket fence, new coat of paint. Her car was still the same, a dented Civic with a faded university bumper sticker. Funny what survives the storms. He didn't come to see her, not directly. He came to live something. The letter to Caleb, folded and reread 20 times. The words came slowly, but truth always does. It wasn't a confession exactly. More a history told sideways, a man's way of saying I failed, I learned, I still love you. He slipped it into the mailbox and turned to leave when the front door opened. Dana. Time had softened her too. The hard lines that once cut through her forehead were less harsh now. Her arms were crossed, but not in defense. She looked at him the way you look at a wound that no longer hurts, just remembers. You're not going to knock, she asked. I wasn't sure you'd want me to. Dana stepped outside, closed the door gently behind her. She wore the same kind of cardigan she used to throw over everything like armor. I read your interview, she said, the one in the Gazette. Patrick blinked. I didn't give an interview. She tilted her head. You kind of did. Coach Mendoza was quoted. Jamal, too, said you turned things around, said you never once mentioned what happened to you. He shrugged. It didn't seem relevant. Dana smiled, just a flicker. You were always bad at PR. They stood in silence for a while. I was angry, she said finally. Back then, but not just at you, at myself for not seeing it, for letting him trick me too. Patrick looked down. I don't blame you. I did, she paused, but I'm working on that. Patrick nodded. That's all he could do. I'm seeing someone, she added, voice soft. He's good to Caleb. Patrick's heart stung, but it didn't break, not this time. I'm glad, he said, and meant it. Dana studied him. You know you never yelled, not once, not during the divorce, not when I took Caleb, not even when you lost your job. What would have been the point? Still, that kind of quiet, it's not weakness. I used to think it was, but maybe it's the strongest thing you ever did. Patrick swallowed. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for you, for us. Dana nodded. Me too. She touched his arm just for a second, then pulled back. He got arrested, you know, she said, eyes lowering. Russell, financial misconduct from last year. They're reopening the old case. Patrick didn't flinch. Not my doing. I know. They stood in that quiet, forgiving silence for another beat. Then she said, you want some coffee, just as people who used to be something. Patrick considered it. I think I'd rather remember how we used to drink it, before everything went sideways. Dana smiled again, fuller this time, fair enough. She went inside, closed the door. And Patrick walked away, hands in pockets, sun on his back. The past wasn't undone. But maybe it didn't have to be. The gym smelled like sweat, wood polish, and hope. Patrick stood on the sidelines, clipboard in hand, watching Jamal sink shot after shot. The bleachers held a scattering of parents, bored siblings, and one unmistakable figure seated in the third row, Caleb. He didn't wave, didn't call out, just gave his father a simple nod. That was their thing now. The nod meant, I see you, I know who you are. Patrick smiled. The game ended with a buzzer-beater layup. Jamal got swarmed, kids jumped, parents clapped. Patrick let it all wash over him like a tide he didn't need to control. He gathered cones, whistled once, and the team fell into a huddle. Win's a win, he said, but that hustle in the fourth, that's who you are, not the scoreboard. Afterward, as the gym emptied, Caleb approached. I liked your speech, he said. Patrick smirked. It's a recycled version of what I used to yell at you during Little Leg. Caleb chuckled, yeah, but with less swearing. They walked outside together. Spring was starting to bloom, early sun warming the pavement, the air thick with pollen and promise. You got plans? Patrick asked. Meeting a few friends, Caleb said, but I wanted to give you something first. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. Patrick opened it slowly. A photo, him and Caleb, Patrick in a ratty hoodie. Caleb, maybe 6 years old, sitting on his lap holding a T-ball trophy like it was the Holy Grail. I found it in Mom's basement, Caleb said, thought maybe you'd forgotten who you were. Patrick stared at it for a long time. I never forgot, he said, I just stopped believing it mattered. Well, Caleb said, clapping him on the back, maybe it matters again. He walked off, no big goodbye, just another nod. Patrick tucked the photo into his pocket like a relic. That night, alone in his apartment, he framed it, placed it beside his bed, not as decoration, as testimony. Russell was going to trial soon. The papers speculated about plea deals and long sentences. Patrick didn't read the articles anymore, not because he didn't care, but because that part of the story was no longer his. In late spring, Coach Mendoza offered him a full-time position, benefits, a team of his own next season. He accepted. On his first official day, he stood in the locker room with his new roster. Nervous faces, kids with something to prove. He took a breath. My name's Coach Hollies, he said. You probably heard things, maybe good, maybe bad, but all I care about is this, what you choose next. That's who you are every damn day. They stared, silent. Then one clapped. Another followed. Soon they all did. Later, Jamal found him in the parking lot. You believe in second chances or something? He asked. Patrick looked at the sky, then at the boy who reminded him what redemption looked like in motion. Not exactly, he said. I believe in earning them. They bumped fists. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the pavement, but Patrick didn't flinch. He had walked through longer ones. And now, finally, he could see the road ahead. Not paved with glories, but with peace.